If you had met Ruth when she was younger, you probably wouldn't have guessed that her life would one day inspire millions of people. She didn't grow up famous. She didn't grow up in Israel. She wasn't even born into a godly family. In fact, Ruth grew up in Moab, a place very different from the land of God's people. But sometimes, the most beautiful love stories don't begin the way we expect. And if you're a single Christian woman trying to figure out your life, your purpose, your calling, or even your future husband, Ruth's story might feel surprisingly familiar. Because before Ruth became part of the greatest love story in history, her life looked a lot like confusion, heartbreak, and unanswered questions. The story actually begins with another woman. Her name was Naomi. Naomi lived in Bethlehem, a small town in Israel. She had a husband named Elimelech and two sons. For a while, life was good. But then, something happened that changed everything. A famine came to the land. Imagine empty grocery stores, empty farms, empty plates. Food became scarce, and Naomi's husband made a difficult decision. We have to leave, he told his family. We need to go somewhere else until this famine ends. So they packed up their lives and moved to Moab, a foreign land where people didn't worship the God of Israel. And that's where Ruth enters the story. What lessons do you think God wants to teach us from the story of Ruth? And if you've not subscribed to our channel, what are you waiting for? Please click on the notification button and bell on the side so you don't miss the next story. Alright, let's get back to the story of Ruth. In Moab, Naomi's two sons grew up and eventually married two Moabite women. One of them was Orpah, and other was Ruth. Ruth was young, hopeful, and probably dreaming about the kind of life many young women dream about. A loving husband, a peaceful home, a future filled with possibilities. For a while, everything seemed normal. But then, tragedy struck. First, Naomi's husband died. Then, not long after, both of Naomi's sons died too. Just like that, three women were left alone. Naomi had no husband, Orpah had no husband, and Ruth had no husband. No husbands, no providers, no clear future. If you've ever felt like life suddenly took a turn you didn't plan for, you can imagine how they felt. For Naomi, the grief was overwhelming. Everything she had built her life around was gone. And so, she decided something. I'm going back to Bethlehem, she said. She had heard that God had provided food for his people again. Home was calling her back. So Naomi began the journey back. At first, Ruth and Orpah walked with her. The road was long and dusty. The air was quiet. Everyone was thinking about what the future might look like. Then Naomi stopped walking. She turned to her daughters-in-laws and said something unexpected. Go back home. They were shocked. Return to your mother's houses, Naomi told them gently. You are still young. You can build new lives. She hugged them. Tears filled her eyes. May the Lord show you kindness. Orpah and Ruth both started crying. No, they said. We want to go with you. But Naomi insisted. My daughters, she said softly, I have nothing left to offer you. She was older now. She couldn't give them new husbands. She couldn't promise them security. Her life felt empty. Finally, Orpah made the difficult choice to go back. She hugged Naomi one last time and walked towards the life she knew in Moab. But Ruth stayed. She didn't move. She held tightly to Naomi, and what Ruth said next became one of the most powerful promises in the Bible. Ruth looked Naomi in the eyes and said, "Don't ask me to leave you. Where you go, I will go. Where you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God." This wasn't just loyalty, this was a decision. Ruth wasn't just choosing Naomi, she was choosing Naomi's God. For Ruth, that meant leaving behind a culture, a country, a comfort zone, a familiar life. She didn't know what Bethlehem would be like. She didn't know how she would survive. She didn't know if she would ever marry again. But she believed something important. If Naomi's God was real, then it was worth trusting. Because Ruth's decision speaks directly to every young woman trying to follow God today. Sometimes, choosing God means stepping into the unknown. Sometimes, obedience doesn't come with guarantees. Sometimes, the right decision looks risky. Ruth could have stayed in Moab and found another husband quickly. But instead, she chose the path that aligned with God's people and God's ways. And that choice would change everything. But she didn't know that yet. All she knew was that she was walking towards a future she couldn't see. When Naomi and Ruth finally arrived in Bethlehem, people started whispering, "Is that Naomi?" The town remembered her from years ago, but Naomi felt like a different person now. She had left Bethlehem full. She returned empty. "Don't call me Naomi," she told them. "Call me Mara." By the way, Mara means bitter. That's how deeply her pain had affected her. But even in Naomi's sadness, something beautiful was beginning. Because right beside her stood Ruth, young, faithful, committed. And even though Ruth didn't realize it, she was standing in the exact place where God was about to rewrite her story. Bethlehem was alive with activities. The barley harvest had begun. Fields of golden grain stretched across the eaves. Workers were gathering crops from sunrise to sun, and for Ruth and Naomi, this harvest meant something important. Food! In Israel, God had given a law that farmers should leave some grains behind in the field so poor people can gather it. This was called gleaning. Ruth noticed the workers in the field and made a decision. "Let me go and gather grain," she told Naomi. Naomi nodded. "Go, my daughter." And just like that, Ruth stepped into the next chapter of her story. She didn't know it yet, but the field she was about to walk into belonged to someone very important. The field belonged to a man named Boaz. Boaz was not just wealthy, he was known for something far more valuable. He loved God. He treated people with kindness. He lived with integrity. In a culture where many men had power, Boaz used his power to protect others. And on one ordinary day, he walked into his field and noticed something unusual. A young woman he had never seen before. She was working harder than anyone else, gathering grain carefully, quietly, faithfully. Her name was Ruth. And this was the moment our path first crossed. But their love story wasn't going to be rushed, because sometimes the most beautiful relationships grow slowly under God's timing. Here's something important for every woman watching the story. Ruth didn't go looking for a man. She went looking for faithfulness. She focused on serving Naomi, trusting God, working diligently. And while she was doing that, God was quietly arranging something bigger than she could imagine. Sometimes we think we need to chase with difference, but Ruth shows us something different. When you walk faithfully with God, He is more than capable of guiding your future, even your love story. In the next chapter, something incredible happens. Boaz approaches Ruth, and the way he treats her will reveal something every Christian woman should look for in a man. Because not every man deserves your heart, but a godly man, a man who fears God, a man who protects, honors, and respects women, that kind of man is rare, and Ruth is about to meet one. But before their love story unfolds, God still has a few lessons about patience, humility, and timing to teach.
Hey sister, if this video blessed you today, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and share this with a friend who needs a little reminder of God's love. Let's grow together right here at Sheila's.